None of this, however, is possible so long as 200 corporations and a handful of special interests have more influence on the President and Congress than 256 million American citizens. And that's the way it is today. We said it in '96, I say it again tonight, America must have campaign reform if America is to remain a true representative democracy. Now, campaign reform means more than the popular but potentially flawed idea of simply putting limits on campaign contributions. For one thing, real reform means, as Russ Verney says, creating a national standard of eligibility for running for Congress and the Senate that applies equally and fairly to all candidates, Republican, Democrat, Reform, Libertarian, Green, U.S. taxpayers, the New Party, the Natural Law Party, among many others. Today, the hurdle for Republican and Democratic candidates is set at 2 feet. The hurdle for third parties is set at 9 feet. Now, personally, I really don't care if the eligibility rules are 2 feet or 9 feet. I just want them to apply equally to everybody. And for the voters in Florida, you have a Proposition 11 that's coming up that will allow you to do that this year. We need a major reform of the Federal Election Commission. One simple little change will make everything right. Allow candidates to file private action civil suits against those who violate the campaign laws. Quickly and at no government cost, much of the current abuse would be eliminated if the cheaters knew that they had to look a jury squarely in the eye and explain their shenanigans. I've saved what I think is the most important action for last. For democracy to work, we must have open and honest debates of the issues. Not spin, not character assassination, not distractions. I'm talking about real debate. In 1992, Ross Perot participated in the presidential debates. He talked about issues, and he talked about it in ways that people could understand, not words wrapped in plastic, bound in styrofoam, presented as slogans. Ross is straightforward. Ross knows what the word "is" means. In 1992, Ross talked about the budget deficit. And once the American people understood, they demanded action, and Congress then acted. Put another way, elections and debates are about more than just winning. They are a time when we discuss issues, change national direction, affirm or reject policies. In 1996, the two parties using the National Debate Commission as coverage refused an open debate. Consequently, the viewership of the debates dropped. Nothing was discussed in the debates. Voter turnout hit a historic low. No issue emerged from the 1996 campaign as a national mandate. I want to look into the television camera and address my following comments to Paul Kirk, to Frank Fahrenkopf, who chair that commission, and to Professor Richard Neustadt, who heads its academic advisory board. My comments to you are this: don't limit national debate again. I want to tell the members of that debate because I'm one of two people who can truly and honestly say what I would have done if I had been in those debates, and I think Ross would have been the same, is I think that we would have made campaign reform a real national issue. I know that for both me and Ross, we would have pressed the other candidates hard. There would have been no cookie-cutter answers. I would have demanded to know what Al Gore thought he was doing at that Buddhist monastery. Now, I can't imagine what Ross would have asked Bill Clinton and Bob Dole about all that Asian money that they were taking, but I think that most Americans would have liked to have heard Ross's questions, and I think most Americans would have benefited from hearing the answer from Bob Dole and Bill Clinton. So, my comments to the debate commission tonight are these. The Reform Party has earned the right for its candidates in the year 2000 to be in those debates. Don't censor us again. Let me say a few, in conclusion, we're in the midst of a circumstance and a time that is unique. The old order refuses to give way. The new order is only emerging. We're in between times. Yet the one thing that is clear is that for all of the challenges and problems that exist, for all of the gridlock and paralysis that binds us, for all of the uncertainties that await for this year, next year, and the year after, for all that and more, it is absolutely nothing compared to what our ancestors overcame. It's nothing. We are the most privileged generation of Americans in history. We are fully capable, as our ancestors were, in dealing with this adversity and defending what is the best government and the finest nation the world has ever known. Thank you.
All I can say is I hope we have ears and we can hear. It's now my pleasure to introduce a lady who will introduce our main speaker. This lady is also an ex-New Yorker. It appears everyone in the United States is an ex-New Yorker of some kind. But it is my privilege now to introduce the Vice Chairman of the Reform Party of the USA from the great state of New Jersey, Pat Benjamin.
I was born in Michigan. I had to get that in. Tonight, I have the honor and privilege of introducing a man who Larry King recently called a great American. A man who Tim Russert of Meet the Press referred to as a real patriot. A man, when asked to speak at a conference sponsored by the Patent Office Professionals Association last month, drew a crowd of over 1,000 people. and hundreds also had to be turned away. After Mr. Perot's speech, a patent examiner who was in attendance said what millions of Americans have been saying since 1992. He makes so much sense. Henry Clay said 150 years ago, "I'd rather be right than be president." Over and over again, we hear the acknowledgement, Ross was right. And he was. Ross was right about the giant sucking sound made by jobs moving from the United States to Mexico and other countries, who provide cheap labor off the backs of their citizens and who have little or no worker or environmental standards. He was right about the U.S. national debt and our need to balance the federal budget without stealing from the Social Security Trust Fund. He was right when he forecast the current constitutional crisis created by President Clinton. And Ross Perot was right when he focused on the special interests buying this country through campaign contributions. This is the man who said, "The United States is not for sale at any price." And he's absolutely right again. I'm honored to introduce the founder of the Reform Party and the 1996 candidate for President of the United States, Ross Perot.
Thank you. Great to be with you. You're shaking them up in the Beltway. Keep it up. Thank you. Now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, now, actually, I was sent down here by all the special interests in the two parties to try to get you people to go away. And I told them, you know, I'm not sure there's a chance, and now I know there's not. So, maybe next time. I don't think so. I want to thank everybody here tonight. I want to thank you for your patriotism. I want the whole world to know that you bought your own ticket, you're paying your own hotel bill. You're not down here as a pawn for anybody except the people in this country. And you do belong to them. The Democrats and Republicans would spend more than Starr has spent on his investigation planning a meeting like this. You guys can do for nickels and dimes what they need tens of thousands of dollars for doing. This is a first-class meeting and a very professional meeting, and you're getting a really carefully thought message out to the American people. God bless you for doing it. So, A special thank you to all of the people who worked so hard to plan this meeting, and the very, very, very special thank you to the people who are running as candidates this year. God bless you. It's a real sacrifice, and thank you. And certainly I want to thank Russ Verney and his team. Here's a guy that never gives up. He has lived Churchill's words, never give in, never give in, never, never, never. And his whole team has, and I certainly want to include Pat Choate in that group of never giving in. Thank you so much. I thank you for your generous introduction. None of us in the Reform Party takes any satisfaction at all in being right. We would much prefer to have been totally wrong. Because if we had been wrong, our nation would have benefited, right? We said, well, we just blew it, we missed it. But the point being, the world would not be suffering the economic instability that it's going through now. Literally billions of people are caught up in a mess. Now, if you need a quick understanding of the magnitude of this mess, just read the New York Times business section today, because all the big financial companies have put up $3.6 billion from the private sector for a rescue. Let me take you back in time to 1970. I was a young man. My company had gone public 2 years ago. The president had asked me to get involved with the POW effort. I was spending all my time on that, and suddenly one day I got a call from the White House, from the Treasury Department, from everybody except the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that Wall Street was going to crumble because the fund that protected the small investors was broke, and DuPont Glorforgan was going out of business, and they had to save and stabilize DuPont Glorforgan, and that would be the turnaround. So I dropped everything, looked into it, and I said, look, I'm buried in the POW issue, we're spending a fortune here, get somebody else to do this. They called back and says, no one else will do it. I said, all right, it's a $5 million problem. That's a long way from $3.6 billion, right? Nobody else would touch it. I said, all right, I'll put in $1 million, get 4 other people, and we've got it covered. Nobody else will do it. And one of my associates looked me in the eye and he said, Ross, if you lose it all, it won't matter. And if you don't do this, millions of people will suffer. So I said, I'll do it. Now, I met with the who's who of the New York Stock Exchange, their board. I met with the Big 8 accounting firm that had just done the audit, and everybody swore on the Bible it was a $5 million problem. Within 30 days, it had grown to a $60 million problem. But that's still nothing compared to this, right? I'm just showing you difference in scope. That's the only reason I tell you that story. Now, I want to thank you for your selfless service to our country since 1992. There is nothing in all this effort for us. This is all for our country, for our children, and for those who will be born in the future. And all you are doing is spending your time and energy and sacrificing for them. And the reason you're doing it is you saw your parents do that for you. And that's what this country is supposed to be about. Now, we're a little smarter than we were in 1992. We deserved the Darwin Award that year because we let Ed Rollins come into our organization. Now, as I've said to you before, there are rules in war, there are rules in mud wrestling, there are no rules in politics. 2 people I had a long association with who were working on the campaign were begging me they needed professional help. I talked to the guy, didn't like him, but I let them talk me into hiring him. Within 60 days, we had to get him out. Because all he was doing was carefully planned destructive damage. There's no question where he came from, and we were dumb enough to be paying him to damage us. Lessons learned the hard way on the road of life. That's the way you get to be a Rhodes Scholar, though. Okay. Now, by the way, you're going to be thrilled to know that I am recognized now as an Oxford man. Oxford University did send me a letter as one of their former graduates. Would I fill out a form telling them what I'd done with my life? Now, there are a lot of practical jokers in Texas, and I thought that's what it was, but I checked into it, and they had gotten confused. They've got somebody running their computer that didn't go to Oxford, I think. So I have had a lot of fun with that, and among other things, they sent me an Oxford tie. And since it's appropriate now to wear a tie to let people know that you care, I almost wore it tonight, but I didn't. Now then, but I want you to know, you got a Rhodes Scholar here now, finally. I don't know whether it was honorary or ornery that they gave it to me, but one way or the other, I got it. Now, in 1996, we created a political party. 1994, we worked our hearts out to give the Republicans a swing vote because they took the Contract for America out of one of our books, and we said, we're not offended. If you do it, that's what we want. We did it, and they didn't deliver it, right? Right. And don't think we've got a short memory, fellas, okay? Fine. Of 1994. Now here's one of my favorite experiences in 1994. We couldn't back people as an organization, but I could endorse people that I felt that would be good candidates and so on and so forth. And we made some mistakes there too. But now then, moving on, we come to 96. And suddenly in 96 we started creating a party, and we had people show up with strong ties to the other parties. And one particularly showed up, and all he ever did is make negative statement of the day every day while he was here. We later found out he'd spent the night in the Lincoln bedroom. The nice thing about the other two parties, they'll always tell you what they did. Now, all I'm saying is, on the hard-knock road of life, we're learning, and we ought to be a lot smarter in 98 and even smarter in the year 2000. But so I guess to net it out, when you get around these other two parties, leave your Boy Scout suit at home, is what I'm saying. Just realize that anything goes on their side. Now, here's one for you. In the middle of the 1996 election, the presidential candidate from the Republican Party called, and in the tightest secrecy wanted to meet with me privately, and I had known him for 20-some-odd years. And I agreed to meet with him as long as it was absolutely private. It was leaked to the press before he got there. The press was told that he was coming to try to get me to swing around and support him. Well, obviously this was a non-meeting, you understand. But again, I never should have talked to the guy, right? I should have said, no, buddy, I'm not going to talk to you guys. I can't trust you. Okay, fine. As an organization, we agree with de Tocqueville, who, when he studied America to determine why it was great, concluded, America is great. And here's what he said. I sought the greatness and genius of America in the fertile fields and the boundless forests. Now, I just flew over a bunch of mountains the other day, and we do have them, right? Fertile fields and boundless forests still. And I looked down at that, and there's no roads through those mountains. It took people with guts and courage to get through there and settle those parts of our country, right? Now, aren't we as strong as they are? You are. We've got to get the whole nation mobilized to be the kind of people they were. And we can. I sought it in our free schools and institutions of learning, and he did that before the government got control of the public schools. And it was not there, even though they were the finest schools in the world then. And now they're at the bottom of the industrialized world. He sought it in the matchless Constitution and the Democratic Congress. Well, you think we're getting close here. Didn't find it there. Not until I went to the churches and temples of America and found them aflame with righteousness did I understand the greatness and goodness and genius of America. And he concluded, America is great because of America is good. And if the American people ever cease being good, America will cease being great. You had goodness, strength. The goodness of the American people is the granite foundation on which our country rests. You had goodness, honesty, integrity, do the right thing, pounded into you all day, every day by your parents. I'm sure most of you are like I was. If I wasn't dead, I had to go to Sunday school and church. Sick wouldn't make it. I got it pounded into me every day at school because the government hadn't told them then they couldn't teach ethics. And I hope you all know that right outside my office is the Aiken Bible. That's the only Bible ever authorized by Congress. It was authorized by the Congress, the Continental Congress, during the Revolutionary War. These are the people who later become the framers of the Constitution. All Bibles printed in English had to be sent from England so England could collect a tariff. Then the war started and they ran out of Bibles. With men fighting barefooted in the snow, they had those Bibles printed so that the children would have them in school. Now, the framers of the Constitution didn't have problems with teaching people right and wrong in ethics, and when you see what's wrong in Washington today, you realize the more we vaccinate the little ones with that today, the better leaders we'll have tomorrow. They've got to be taught honesty and integrity and all these things that seem to be totally missing in our political process today. If we want our country to thrive and survive, we must have a strong moral, ethical base with every single individual in this country taking full responsibility for his or her own actions. That's what made us great. We must love and care for one another and not count on some government agency to do it. If you got a neighbor in trouble, help them right on the spot. That's what made us great. That'll keep us great. You can fill your heart with love or you can fill it with hate. And if our country's going to be great, we'd better fill our hearts with love and no matter how, and then give it away and give it away, and no matter how much you give, your heart will never be empty of love if you'll fill it with love. After 200 years, Congress thinks we can pass laws to make us good. No, you can only pass laws to punish us for being bad. And then they don't work if you got a good lawyer. Okay. The goodness has to come from in here. And only the people can build and strengthen this granite base. We've got to get totally rid of the stress and hatred that divides our country. As I've said 1,000 times, we ought to do it because that's what everything we're taught tells us. But we're all here together. Nobody's leaving. We're kind of stuck with one another. So we ought to learn to love one another and get along for practical reasons. But if you can't do that, just realize it makes good sense for us to all work together because united teams win and divided teams lose. And we've got to overcome that. Scottish professor Alexander Tytler, he's a historian, in 1787, just as our country was being formed, wrote, "A democracy can only exist until the voters discover they can vote themselves money from the public treasury." Aha! Took us till 1930 to really get smart at that. From that moment on, the majority always, and you'll see this in 98, votes for candidates promising the people benefits from the public treasury, or what you and I call free candy, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy. Now, you know and I know everybody's going to be out there promising the moon, and money doesn't fall out of the sky. You and I have to pay for everything we do, and so let's not do stuff that's stupid. Let's do stuff that makes sense. The average age, according to Professor Tytler, back through history in 1787, of the world's greatest democracies has been 200 years. George Washington, our first president, was sworn in a little over 200 years ago. Our first president was a man who could not tell a lie. You and I had that tattooed into our heads from the time we were little children. "200 years later, we have a president that cannot tell the truth, and I'm going to explain it to you. Now, wait a minute. Don't you understand that everybody wants him to stay? That everybody thinks he's doing a good job? Oh my, I mean, you all are out of touch, I'm sorry. Now, I would like, while I have all these nice people, you know, all this is determined by a poll of 300 or 400 people. You know how that goes. How many people here in this audience tonight have ever been called by a pollster? I hate to bring it up. I'm afraid they'll start calling me. But anyhow, the point I'm still looking for somebody that these guys talk to. But anyhow, that's another story. But down where the rubber meets the road, you get out there in Walmart and Home Depot and see folks out there in the real world, they don't like what's going on, right? Because they don't want their children to be exposed to all this, right? They think the President of the United States should set the standard in terms of moral and ethical behavior, right? He should be a role model and an inspiration to our children, not an embarrassment to our nation. I wonder why it's so hard to get that message out. Well, you know, there's a nice, these guys bought and paid for by a lot of folks here. He's doing exactly what they want him to do, and they got their little puppet out there dancing and juggling for them, and they don't want anything to happen, right? That's where we are, and it's up to people like you to make sure that everybody understands it. Let's think back now. We know where we are today. Think of the people that came over on the sailing ships. They wanted to be free. They wanted to practice the religion of their choice. They gave us all these things. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have heat. They didn't have a house. They didn't have anything when they showed up. There was no place to shop for food. You had to hunt for food. These were strong, tough people who were driven by the strongest possible and best possible motives. Coming off Ellis Island, couldn't speak English. Well, surely there's a government program to take care of them. No, you just got out and hustled, right? Okay. There is a slogan they used about people who went west on the covered wagons. The cowards never started, the weak died on the way, and only the strong survived. And if you look at the trip they took, that had to be true. The signers of the Constitution paid a terrible price. If you've never read the details, read it, and the kind of price you and I have had to pay is nothing. On a really bad day when you're being sliced and diced and cut to pieces, go back and read stuff like that, you realize this is nothing. The Minutemen that fought and won the Revolution were incredible. They shouldn't have even had a chance, but they won because they were on fire to win it. Civil War divided our nation, then we put it back together. And a lot of credit goes to the people who did that. World War I, incredible. World War II, unbelievable what our country did to save and stabilize the world. Then in Korea and in Vietnam and in many smaller conflicts, our people again and again went out and put their lives on the line. And let me say for the first time here, if your son or daughter or someone you love is going to have to go risk their life for their country, oh, say it's just a little war. You're just as dead in Haiti as you were on Normandy Beach, right? Same principle. The person you give that responsibility to has to be a person of absolute integrity, honesty, and the highest principles, and total self-control of what his emotions are. Can we agree? Now, he knows because we're so gullible, and maybe I should say stupid, that if he starts a war and all the news start to cover it, we kind of look at it like the Super Bowl. And everybody just kind of sits there hyperventilating, and the audiences go up, and the advertisers come in, and on and on and on. You know, I think the next time we have a war, we ought to all agree not to watch it. The point being, now, if you haven't seen Private Ryan and you're young and you've never been in the armed forces, go see Private Ryan and see what war is all about. That's fighting, bleeding, and dying. And you don't send people off to do that to get a bump in the polls. Now, anybody that ever does that ought to be put on the next rocket trip one way. We know as an organization, and we believe to our inner soul, that the most efficient government the world will ever know is the strong family unit. Nothing in a free society will ever replace that. It teaches the children to live their religious beliefs, to live the golden rule. Do unto others you would have them do unto you. Teach our children by example and make sure they practice it. Tell the truth. Be honest, trustworthy, loyal. They'll get it again in scouting. Help other people at all times. Always live in the center of the field of ethical behavior and ask yourself, is it right or wrong? Never ask, is it legal or illegal? Have you heard the word right or wrong even come up lately? That's our standard, and believe me, if anybody's going to be able to press a nuclear button or send our sons and daughters into battle, that's the only standard that person can live by. Do you agree? Now, the last thing in the world we ever want our children to do is run down the sidelines of ethical behavior surrounded by lawyers and spin masters asking themselves, is it legal or illegal? That is not what we need to raise our children to be, and everybody in a senior leadership role in our country needs to epitomize what we're teaching our children at home, right? And yet you can be teaching your children the highest moral and ethical standards, and if they get on the wrong TV channel, they will have the morals of a rabbit in 15 minutes. And surely we're a better country than that. Can we agree that we need to recognize and live the principle that a lie is a lie, and it doesn't matter whether it's under oath or not? I'm sure everybody here tonight wants to know my exact position on the White House scandals. I've made no comments. I don't like to think about it. I don't like to watch it. But I know you want me to take a position, so here's my formal position. I think it is plain that the President should resign and spare the country the agony of impeachment and removal proceedings. Would spare the country a lot of agony, and he should just go on and resign. And finally, there's no point putting this country through an impeachment process since the President isn't making any pretense of innocence now. Do you agree? Now, everything I have just read, these are not my words. This is what Bill Clinton said about Richard Nixon in 1974. Now then, now we need to debate the meaning of the word is, because that was way back then, right? Okay. Now I'm going to tell you my view in plain Texas talk. Any man who would conduct himself in such an emotional, unstable manner and bring worldwide shame first to his family and then to a vulnerable young woman and finally to the United States of America is unfit to be the president of this great country. I said in 1992, he's a bright young guy in business. I might put him somewhere and train him to be a middle manager. Right now, I wouldn't have him third shift in a hamburger stand responsible for cleaning out the sink after everybody had gone home. And I'm sure Ross, are you saying this man has low morals and ethics? No. I'm saying he has no morals and ethics. And I'm saying, watch my lips. The President is mentally and emotionally unstable. Now, stay with me here. Every part of the human body is controlled by the brain. Your ability to breathe is controlled by the brain. Your heartbeat is controlled by the brain. Your ability to see, your eye sends a signal, but if your neurons are not connected to the brain, you can't see. Your ability to walk is controlled by the brain. Wiggle your fingers is controlled by the brain. Trillions of neurons are connected. The brain is the world's most complex computer. Parts of the President's brain work well. He is an excellent speaker. He is an Academy Award level actor. But if he bites his lip one more time, I'm not sure I can take it. Yeah. He is intellectually able to absorb and assimilate a lot of information. But now let's go to the parts that don't work well. The part of the brain that involves self-control does not work well at all. The part that involves good judgment has a lot of static in the circuitry and is not working well at all. The part of the brain that controls morality and honesty never got connected. The part of a person's brain that would give the highest priority for concern to his family is not there, and I think it will take major surgery to correct that. The part of the brain that would normally cause you to have great concern for your loyal friends and never say or do anything that would embarrass them and never lie to them and certainly never send them out to lie for you doesn't exist. And the part of the brain that involves self-discipline and self-control, again, is not functioning. Parts of his memory work perfectly. Other parts of his memory don't work at all. Now, what part does anything that could ever embarrass or threaten him, that part of the brain just doesn't work. I'm sorry. Okay. The part of the brain that stores principles such as duty, honor, and country, faith, courage, service, truth, and honor over all. Those are quotes from the 2 service academies. That's not working at all. The part of the brain that would store, remember, and live by the principle that when principle is involved, be deaf to expediency, that part's not functioning. And then the part that would store George Washington's simple phrase, I cannot tell a lie. That doesn't work either. Now, I hope I've made my point that this guy's brain's not working correct. Now, I'll tell you this. Here's another offer. If anybody wants to argue with me, I'll buy the television time. Okay? Now, don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. Okay. See, you all are way up the curve on an issue the American people don't know anything about, and that's the destruction of our patent system. I've offered for over a year now for all these people who are putting all this lobbying money up and who are sneaking and weaving and bobbing, who don't want any hearings because it can't stand the light of day, who try to attach it to this bill, to that bill, and so on and so forth. Said, let's debate this for the American people, or at least let's have hearings if it's such a good idea in Congress. And I'm still waiting for the phone to ring from any of the people who are introducing the bill, any senior leaders in Congress, the President's Patent Office Director. That's the President's appointee. This is something the President wants. These guys are hidden behind a rock on that, and they won't come out and talk about it. Okay. Well, when I was a boy, they told me first pray, then act. Okay? Okay. Well, when the part of the brain that involves honesty and integrity and principle and concern for protecting your loved ones, loyalty to your friends, when those parts aren't working, that person cannot have the power to send our sons and daughter into combat. That person. Now just think a guy that's this unstable mentally and emotionally. Now, this stuff, these telephone conversations, you know, with the girl. You know, and I don't mean just saying, how are you? I'm talking about what this weird stuff. Anybody that's fouled up shouldn't be able to get within a mile of the nuclear button. Can we agree with that? This guy cannot be an effective leader in dealing with the international economic crisis. He needs to go and move someone. If he cares about this country, he will go. If he loves this country, he will go. If he will put this country in front of his ego, he will go. Now I'm back to the defective brain. No person with any sense of responsibility or morality would put the world's economy at risk by trying to hold on to his position of power. Literally billions of people could suffer because of a big ego. Now that part of his brain is thriving. Okay. Now everybody seems to think that he will probably hold on, because that part of his brain that craves power is totally out of control. It's working too well. And someone once said power is wonderful and absolute power is absolutely wonderful. Well, the point is, that's what holds him there. He's smart enough to know he should go. He's smart enough to know he's an embarrassment to our country. He's smart enough to know he'll never recover from this one. And he should be smart enough and caring enough about other people. All this stuff he says, you know, with tears in his eyes and biting his lip about people, if he means it, he ought to get out of there so we can go back to work. Now then, have there been any other world leaders that had these same mental defects? Yes. People so driven for power, they would do anything to keep it. Hitler had it. Stalin had it. Saddam Hussein has it. Castro's got it, just to mention a few. Now, surely we can do better than that in the good old USA, and surely his conscience, now I don't know I don't think he has one, but maybe we can spark a little life in the conscience. Yet, if you had a conscience, you'd feel so bad you just couldn't come out in public, right? If you'd done all this stuff, you couldn't go waltzing around pretending everything was fine at home. Yeah, no, just that's acting, that's show business. Okay. This is all driven by lust for power and not by principle. And when principle is involved, be deaf to expediency. Now let's take a moment. Now while all this inexcusable stuff is going on, let's look around the world. We're suffering in terms of world leadership. Now, you know, he thinks it's high noon, he's John Wayne, that's a movie actor again. The facts are, let's look at, nobody ever looks at the facts anymore. Everybody thinks, you know, everything is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Everybody thinks the budget will be balanced forever, and you and I know that after it was going to balance itself by the year 2002. The economy got a little good, and it got balanced early, assuming you count Social Security and all the little games they play. But we also know that the government figures show it's going to take off like a rocket in the 21st century. We also know that President Clinton in 1995 said the next generation to be born. That's 1995, right? So when they're 20 years old, that's 2015, right? They're out working, paying 82% tax rate. I haven't heard him say that was a mistake, have you? Point being, he won't be around then, and some other poor devil is going to be stuck with a mess. All right, but right now, in North Korea, they've demonstrated their ability to launch a ballistic missile, 4,000-mile range. They can target both Hawaii and Alaska. North Korea is the world's biggest exporter of ballistic missiles to third world nations. Having all these little fuzzy third world nations have nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles is not pretty. That's bad for the planet. The Asian economic crisis has been going on for a year. A third of the world is in recession. It now threatens the United States economy. Japan's banks hold $1 trillion in bad loans. Now, you can't self-destruct the way the Japanese did, but they did. See, they were so successful, they had so much money in the banks, they made a bunch of bad loans to all these Indonesian countries and what have you, and now they're messed up. Indonesia, as you know, is in the tank, is on the verge of a civil war, and its economy is devastated. But at the same time, I want you to know the World Trade Organization and NAFTA are doing just fine, folks. Don't worry about any of this. It's all fine. Now, you know, the average citizen thinks it's working. But, I mean, if you just look at the facts. Okay, India and Pakistan are arch foes in dueling nuclear tests. They're firing nuclear tests just to flex their muscles with one another this year. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein threw out our nuclear inspectors and is thumbing his nose at us because he knows he can get away with it now. And I don't know if you read about the Marine who was the nuclear inspector who resigned on principle. Now that's my kind of guy. Now, if the Republicans who control Congress were people of integrity, they would give him that special gold congressional medal for his courage, because he would not bend or bow or compromise. He said, I can't do that, that's wrong. Okay, down in Kenya, Tanzania, they bombed the embassy in Kenya. We had a retaliatory strike in Sudan, and hit a pharmaceutical factory, and everybody said that was making chemical weapons, but later on everybody's kind of running, ducking, hiding, what have you. And the timing on when that occurred was really interesting, wouldn't you say? But they understand us, man. We can't, we just love a little military action over there, and we forget fighting, bleeding, and dying is what it's all about, and it should be. And if we ever have a president in the White House, the test is, would you send your son and daughter? Right? That's the test. I'd go before I'd send my children. You would too. And the second thing is, when you do it, I don't care if it's a 3-day war, impose sacrifice on the American people from day one, so they never forget those guys are fighting, bleeding, and dying. We had rationing, we had all those things in World War II that we had to have. We got to come up with something for the short wars, so that every day, all day, every day, we realize we are sacrificing a little bit. Now, what we're sacrificing is nothing compared to getting shot at, but at least we're all part of it. Then we keep our heads straight on whether or not it's worth doing, or if it's just a political trick. Russia. Russia's a land that covers 12 time zones. Its economy has melted down. The ruble is worthless. Bill Clinton and President Yeltsin are both in trouble. 2 weak leaders, and very, very critical situation there. And the Russian military is not being paid. And I told you in a couple of elections, I said, you don't want a hungry bear over there. And we have one. Latin America and South America economies are in trouble. Brazilian stock market lost 2/3 of its value recently. Drugs are still pouring out of Mexico. We do a lot of strutting around about the drug war, but we don't, we talk the talk, but we let them still pour in all those trucks. And again, I hear from DEA agents that they've been told to pull back since the Mexican economy got in trouble, because they needed the money. Now, I promised all of you that if you ever elected me president, there would be one war, and that would be a war on drugs, and it would be merciless, and we would not tolerate it. Now, here was pull back because they need the money. And they're poisoning your children on the streets. That's chemical warfare against your children. Okay? Now, since the president has gotten in so much trouble, and since one rumor about him has been going around for years, and that is his use of drugs, and he admitted that he used drugs as a young man, but smoked but didn't inhale. You remember that one? But there's stories all over Arkansas that he was still fooling with it. And I think the least the president, and he is very secretive about his medical records, I think the very least the president could do is look us in the eye and swear under oath that the last time he used drugs was way back there, and that there has never been a single case since then, and make his medical records available to an independent group. I don't want to get into this, but is there any record there of drug use or not? Because you cannot get a secret clearance if you use drugs. Now, you know he had a lot of staff members that couldn't get secret clearances in the White House that needed them. I never dreamed I'd live to the point where, well, this was my buddy in the campaign, so I'm going to keep him even though he's slum. You follow me? The point being, you can't get a secret clearance. Now, here's the man that has the ability to send your children into combat and press the nuclear button and every other thing. You've got to know if he has that vulnerability also. To make a long story short, I'll hold my breath on that one. I won't hold my breath on that one because, they're going to run, duck, and they're not going to touch that one and say, I wish they wouldn't invade my privacy. Well, listen, your privacy is insignificant compared to the safety of this country and the safety of our sons and daughters and the safety of the world. And to heck with your privacy, buddy. Tell us the facts. Now then, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. I won't ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do also. I'll make my medical records available to you. I will swear under oath right now I've never touched that stuff in my life. Now then. And I'll say to the president, put me in a federal court where I have to go to prison for 20 years if I lie. Now then, I say to him, you do the same thing. Fine. Everywhere I go, people say, Ross, why do you do all this? Because you know they're just going to cut you to pieces. That's all they ever do. And they've got whole teams that slice and dice and shred people. And they're good at it. And you've had to endure a lot of that, but God bless you, you keep on keeping on. And you know that tough times never last, but tough people do, and you know that perseverance is always the thing that pays off in the end. But people are saying, why you do this? This is the way my parents raised me. I'm sure that's why you do it. I had the greatest mother and father in the world. No child could have had better parents, and probably you would argue with me that you did. But the point is, I couldn't have had more wonderful parents. My mother was an angel. You probably all heard me talk about her a lot, but just very briefly tonight about my dad. He never got to finish high school. He had to leave high school when he was 14 because his dad died. And he took care at 14 and working as a Texas cowboy, he took care of his mother, his sister, and his younger brother, and he sent his younger brother through college. Now, anybody that could send his younger brother through college could have sent himself through college, right? That's the kind of man he was. Man of absolute honor and integrity. Nobody ever asked him to, this back in old Texas where a man's word was his bond, nobody would ever ask him to sign a paper on anything. They knew he'd do what he said he would do. He was my best friend. Every afternoon after school, he'd pick me up and we'd go horseback riding till dark. Not many boys are that lucky. He would take me to the cattle auctions and the horse auctions on the weekends. And as a little boy, he'd let me buy bridles and saddles, but I had to buy them and sell them the same day. And then he'd let me buy horses and cattle. I had to buy that and sell the same day, called a day trader. And he was teaching me business. He was anxious for me to go to work at the earliest possible age. I started at 6. And because he thought there were some really important things you learned by working hard all your life. And I did learn those things. And one thing, just to give you a sense of what it really takes, I think, to make America great, when I was 6 years old, he wrote down things for me that I had to understand if I wanted to be successful. They hang outside my office, and many of you that have been there have seen them all. There's about 40. I'm just going to read a handful. The world wants things done, not excuses. One thing done well is worth 1,000,000 good excuses. It's not a bad thing to teach a 6-year-old, right? Your services will not command a premium if your word has to be discounted. That's a relevant one. Anybody who puts all he has into his work usually succeeds because he has little competition. A clock watcher will never become the man of the hour. Any fool can tear down a castle, but it takes a wise man to even build a small log cabin. You cannot dream yourself into character. You must hammer yourself into character. We spend too much time thinking about what is going to happen and too little time making things happen. Just go ahead and do it. It's easier to succeed than to explain why you didn't. You don't have to knock on the back door if you have something really good to deliver. Use what talent you possess. I love this one. The woods would be very silent if no birds could sing except those who sang the very best. So just take what you've got and make the best of it. Do what you have to do and do it now. Spell now backward and you have the answer. In other words, you won. Minds are like parachutes. They only function when they're open. If you're not afraid to face the music, one day you might lead the band. Those who obey the road signs of experience are the first to arrive at the destination. And finally, the less you leave to chance, the better chance you have. Right. So, I think Abraham Lincoln said, all I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my parents. And certainly I do. I couldn't have had greater parents. I want to close tonight with something I read in the Salvation Army War Cry magazine that I think says everything that we need to say about character and integrity. There was an 8.2 Richter scale earthquake in Armenia. 30,000 people were killed in 4 minutes. A public school with the children in it collapsed. A father who had a son in that public school left his wife and rushed to the school to find his son. As I read this, I thought about my dad. After the initial shock, he remembered the promise he had made to his boy. And this is it. No matter what, I will always be there for you. Tears filled the father's eyes. As he looked at the school, it looked hopeless, but he kept remembering what he'd told his son. He knew where his son's classroom was, in the back right corner of the school. He rushed to the spot and started digging through the rubble. As he was digging, other forlorn parents arrived, clutching their hearts and saying, my son, my daughter. Other well-meaning parents tried to pull him off of what was left of the school, saying, it's too late. The children are dead. You can't help. Sounds like the Republican Party. Go home. Come on, face reality. There's nothing you can do. You're just going to make things worse. He responded with one line. Are you going to help me now? The fire chief showed up. He said, fires are breaking out everywhere. Get out of here. He looked at the fire chief and said, are you going to help me now? He walked away. Police came and said, you're angry and distraught. It's over. You're endangering others. Go home. We'll handle it. He looked at the police and said, are you going to help me now? And they left. No one helped him. Courageously, he continued digging through the rubble. He dug for 12, for 18, for 36 hours. And finally, on the 38th hour, he pulled back a boulder and heard his son's voice. He screamed his son's name, Armand. Dad, it's me. Dad, I told the other kids not to worry. I told them that if you were alive, you would save me, and when you saved me, they would be saved. You promised no matter what. I'll always be there for you. You did it, Dad. What's going on in there? How is it? The father asked. There are 14 of us left out of 33, Dad. We're scared, we're hungry, thirsty, and we're thankful you're here. When the building collapsed, it made a wedge like a triangle, and we're in the triangle. Come on out, Armand. No, Dad. Let the other kids come out first, because I know you'll get me no matter what. I know you will be there for me. Now, I know that's the way you run your family. Isn't that the way our president should run our country? Fine. Thank you. Now, as you do your work, and your work is tough, I want you on every good day, but certainly on the bad days, to remember the last line of the Star-Spangled Banner, because it's a question. It says, "Oh, say, does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave?" It says, is it still flying? Over the land of the free and the home of the brave. And believe me, it won't be waving if we're not brave. If we want to be free, we've got to be brave. And you are brave, and you have done a magnificent job. It has been a tough, thankless job. But I'll take this one instead of fighting the revolution, right? I'll take this one rather than Normandy Beach. See, and if necessary, I'm sure we'd fight. But the point is, just by spending our time and energy, you can make, and you have made, a huge difference. And I think that we have a tremendous obligation to get our country off its duff on this issue of what are the principles and the qualities and the characteristics our president should have, and what are the deficiencies that can't be corrected that this president has, and can we risk having a person that's mentally unstable in a job where he can send your sons and daughters off to war, cause an international economic crisis to turn into a collapse because he's worried about his image. He shouldn't be thinking about himself. See, Armand's dad was not thinking about himself, right? He was thinking about Armand. Now, I could stand here with a tear in my eye and my lips and say, I care, cut all that stuff out. Let's see what action is what talk is cheap, right? Words are plentiful, but deeds are precious, and we want deeds. Unfortunately, this man has lost his validity with the American people. He can never regain it. Only his lust for power, gosh, he's got several, but anyhow, his lust for power keeps him there. And he has an enormous obligation, and all of the people in the Democratic Party need to tell him in a very positive, constructive way, Mr. President, you have forfeited the right to lead this country because you have shown the American people that you don't have the mental stability and the discipline and self-control and the moral and ethical standards needed in the President of the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you. Keep up your great work. Great to be with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a great American, Ross Perot.
If you'd like a VHS copy of this program or any other C-SPAN program,